Hello. Hello, Miss Debbie. Think you might be my only one in class tonight. All right, let's see here. Hello. Hey, Ronnie. How you doing? I was looking in my chat room. I didn't see anybody. I was like, I'm gonna be alone tonight. And then Miss Debbie popped in. Nope, there's Peter. Hey, Peter. All right. We're getting some people. Oh my, oh my. We'll give everybody a chance to get in. I hope y'all are having a good evening. And, Halloween's coming up. Hope you have some fun trick-or-treaters and do some trick-or-treating yourself. Ronnie, don't be toilet paper people in houses now. Doing well. Doing well. Getting everything ready for we got some upcoming specials, guys, for our holiday sales for Black Friday. So working on that. Wait till you see those. We're going to have accessories on sale. We're going to have software upgrades on sale. Units on sale. All kinds of stuff. I'm having a bad hair day. I got hair sticking up all over the place. All right, we're going to get started here in a few moments. We're going to be talking about, it's kind of a continuation of last week's class, but even though the topic is corbels again, we're going to be modeling in this, and we're going to talk about creating models and assembling models. For those of you that have Aspire and stuff, we're going to be doing some work in Aspire and things. And for those of you that don't, we're going to be working in, the Desktop Pro type environment, the VCarve environment, to show how we would go about creating some different things or different types of styles and all. But I want to, the fundamentals is going to be the key thing. It's the approach to the process, not necessarily the project, but the approach to the process and how we would go about creating these things. And then we could relate these approaches to different things, different types of projects. If we ever had to do assemblies of models, or if we ever had to do modeling in general, if you have the Inspire environment, how would we begin, or what would we do? So that's what I want to cover with you. All right, I think we can go ahead, give it another minute, and then we'll jump over into our software and we will get rocking and rolling. Now, for the first part, I will be working in the Aspire. Now, don't get discouraged if you don't have Aspire. Pay attention. Stick with me because, you know, some of the techniques and all relate to the V-carve environment as well, because I will be moving over into the V-carve environment and showing the process in there as well. But I want to start off in the Aspire just to show the general concept of building a model and how we can approach it. All right, so let's go ahead and let's get the ball rolling. Let's get over into our Vectric software. Now, in general, with the Vectric software, I'm just, for my job setup, I'm just doing a, do I want this as a double-sided job? Bear with me a second. No, it's going to be a single-sided environment for this one. Single-sided job. I'm just working with a 12-inch by 12-inch blank. I am working with a thick piece. This is something that, you know, we can debate and talk about and stuff on how we approach this, depending on if we're carving on the front or on the sides of things. Sorry about that. I was reading a comment. You know, whether we're doing the front face of something or on the sides, how we would approach it and stuff. So for this, I've got an oversized piece so I can kind of work around some things. And bear with me a second. Hey Ken, how are you doing? Let me see what Matt's got to say. Let's see here. I just had to find nothing to do with what you're doing tonight, but I have Bobcat, and you said you like the other one a lot better. I make molds. Matt, when I said I like the other one better, you're talking about Vectric, what we're working in tonight. I started out with Bobcat and ended up converting over. I do not know how any of this tonight's topic is going to relate to Bobcat, so I don't know how it would translate into that program, but you know, maybe we can pick something up from that. I'm not sure. Now, I am going to be working for touching off on my machine bed, which is my my jig, my surface of my jig, like I always do each week, and I will be working off the bottom left corner for the XY datum position, but you can set this up however you want. Now, in here, my project and all, what I basically did, imagine if we were looking from the top down on the Corbel, and let's see if I can kind of, let me see if I can find a relatable picture, like a face on, front on, top down. Bear with me, they got everything turned sideways. I can't find anything related to that. All right, we're looking from the top down, guys. So we're looking basically kind of at the front of the Corbel and all. So I've got this rectangle here in that area. I couldn't find a reference picture fast enough. But we're working on the front area. And I've got this rectangle sized at about 8 1/4, because if it was standing upright, that's how tall my Corbel is going to be. And it's about 3 inches wide over on the width. Now, if I were to rotate this part, let's go ahead and rotate it 90 degrees. If I were to rotate this, imagine if we were looking at the front of the Corbel here. I'm going to be giving this a kind of a curved shape front. So it's very thin at the bottom, and then it widens out as it gets to the top. And then I'm going to throw some 3D models on top of that curve and blend them together. And then we can look at, you know, working off the sides of our project too, like a two-sided project. Now, overall, my Corbel, as far as how deep it's going to be, I've got my piece set up for a 2.5 inch piece. So if we were to look at the 3D model, if I were to tilt my board, let's come in here and let me pull my board up. You know, it's going to be 2.5 inches thick from the front, which we're looking at, back to the back that's going to be up against the wall type of deal. Now, what I need to do first and foremost is I need to create that profile. So let's start off with a rectangle here, and now we're going to be looking at a side view here. And what I want to do is I'm going to take and go into node editing mode, and I'm going to turn this line into a Bezier curve, and I'm going to bring this back quite a bit, and I'm going to bring this out. See if I can make that curve a little more dramatic. So as a side view of my corbel, I'm going to have basically this relative shape here. We can, let's see if I can pull this down and out a little bit. There we go. So we're going to have this basic relative shape. Now, when this shelf gets assembled and stuff, or the back bracket and everything, this is just going to be the centerpiece. It's going to have a top and back to the part. Oops. Let's see if I can. It's going to have a top and a back to this part, and oh, let's see here. Give that a little bit more thickness. Maybe bring this out a little bit more. Okay. So something roughly like that. So this is kind of a side view of what we're doing. So what we need to do is, hey Dave, how you doing, buddy? Hey everybody. What we need to do is I need to create this profile, this curved profile that's going to get cut out of the front of my part here. And it doesn't matter which way I'm carving it, whether I'm carving it horizontally like this on my board, or if I rotated it back 90 degrees, either way, it's still going to fly. And so for this, to have this curve sweep along this profile, all I need is my top and my bottom line. And so for that, I'm just going to go into node editing mode. And on this part here, I'm going to delete this span here and delete this span here. So basically, I've got two drive rails that will be, I'll be sweeping my profile along. Now, as far as the profile goes, I want to make sure, because this, these two parts here, they should be sized at 8 1/4 distance apart. So basically the overall height. So I want to make sure my profile is relative to that height, and I'm just a little tall. So I'm going to bring this down a bit. Let's get rid of that other 8 there. Just bring it down just a little bit so it has that overall height. And the curvature or the width of this is really going to represent how thick my part is. And I want it to have an overall thickness of that 2.5 inches, you know, the thickness of my material. So my key thing is in this height here, I want to be at that 2.5, and right now I'm at 2 3/4. So I'm a little overshot on my 2.5 inch thickness of my material. So I would end up getting an error saying that the model exceeds my material thickness. And so let's go ahead and reduce that down to about 2.5. Okay. And I can go ahead and get rid of this. I just wanted to draw that backer board in there. Now, when we have a profile, we do not need that back line. We only need the 3 sides. So in this case, the top, the front, and the bottom part. So we don't need this back side here. So I'm going to go ahead and go into node editing. That's the second icon on my edit objects first row. And I'm going to get rid of this span. The span is the line between two nodes. So if I right click on that, I can delete that span. And now I've got this general profile. And this is the profile that I'm going to be sweeping between these two drive rails. So let's do that. And now this is basically essentially called a 2-rail sweep. I'm going to show you how we can do this in the V-carve when we move over to the V-carve, how we can create this same profile using the molding toolpath. Okay, using the molding toolpath in the V-carves and all. But right now I'm going to basically be utilizing some of the Aspire tools that are available to us. And in this case, it's going to be the 2-rail sweep tool. So on the 2-rail sweep tool, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select my bottom rail first, top rail second. It really doesn't matter, but I always start from the bottom up. Sometimes it does matter, and you can actually, if you click the top one first and the bottom line last, then it'll flip your design upside down, and we may not want that. So I always start from the bottom up, and that's going to be my drive rails. And the key thing about this is to make sure that my start points of my drive rails are both on the same side. Otherwise, it would twist the model. If I had a start point on one side and a start point on the other, then it would twist the model that from those two different directions. So we need to make sure our start points, these green nodes here, and our direction of sweeping are both going in the same direction. Now with that, I will grab my profile here, and I'm going to sweep between the two spans. And we'll go ahead, and this will be an add because I'm kind of building this component, so we will sweep that along. Now if I go into my 3D view here, if we turn this to the side, you will see the general shape. Let's get out of, let's change our wood color to something a little bit darker. In the maple. Let's go with like a cherry or something just to give us some okay. All right, so now if we come into our 3D view here, we should be able to see our our 3D shape, our 3D model. Now, one of the things that we have to look at is my model is sweeping, and then there's this curvature and it's coming out. Now, this thin area here, you may tend to think that there's going to be no wood back there and it's going to be a very thin piece. There's actually still material underneath, my placement and all, and so therefore it's not, it's not going to be that thin. If you were concerned about that, then of course you can change your curvature, and make this a little bit wider. We could bring this out a little more if we wanted to. But for the most part, we should be good. All right, so now I've got my general shape of my part, and if I were to come in and create a 3D Finished Toolpath on this, you can see that I am overshooting my model thickness. Go. And I want my material, my model, at the top of the material, that extra meat and everything. Let's put the model where it belongs. Boy, I'm having all kinds of issues there. I don't know what my glitch is, but bear with me a second. There we go. All right. So I want my model at the top. That extra meat back there is what I want on the back end. and all. So with that setup, isn't that nice how it throws it back up there? What is happening? Bear with me a second. I don't know if there's a spire glitch going on. Stand by a minute. I'm gonna change. There's a little glitch going on there. I've got a glitch, guys. I've got a glitch. That's a new one on me. It's literally a glitch. 2.0. What is my major malfunction here? I've got a glitch, guys. I don't know if it's in my Aspire or what. But what we're going to do is we're going to reopen it, because that was doing something funky that I don't know what in the world was happening. Gotta love it. All right. One more time. Let's create a new file. 12 by 12 by 2.5. Working off the machine bed. I'm going to click OK. I'm going to draw my rectangle here. And it's going to have a width of 3 inches and overall height of 8 1/4. I'm going to take and hold down my control key and drag off a copy of that there. I'm going to change this rectangle size. I still want my 8 1/4 height, but I need to reduce this down. And because I was having that little glitch, I'm going to reduce this down to 2 1/4 instead of my 2.5 material thickness. And let's go back into node editing. Let's delete this span. Let's turn this span into a Bezier curve. We're going to move this part back. And let's get our curve built back up. All right, let's make sure my overall size did not change. I'm still under my 2.5, which is good. And now I'm going to come in here with node editing, and I'm going to delete this right span. Delete this left span. That gets us back to where we were. In our 2-rail sweep tool, I'm going to select my drive rails, and then I'm going to select my profile. I'm going to sweep between those 2 spans. I'm going to apply that. Wonderful. Look in my 3D view here. My part. I can tell now I'm below my Z plane. Let's add a Z plane to this. That Z plane is my surface of my wood. I just want to add that in for a moment so I can make sure that there we go. All right. You hear a brief pause and silence from me. That's because So I should have error. I'm not sure what that's doing. Okay. Long story short. All right, I've got. Sorry about that, guys. There was a little bit of a glitch in things going in. Scale both sides. Is this set up as a two-sided job? No. Ah. Hold on a minute there, fellers. I know this is not our ideal scenario. But let me see what's happening here. That's why. I was in a double-sided environment. Okay. Had something weird going on. Still got something weird going on. I think when I updated to 9.510, I confused my software. Oh, Lord of mercy. I'm going to back up a little bit so we can move on. Single-sided job. Rectangle. 3 inches wide. 8 1/4 inches tall. Rinse and repeat. Double click. Hold down the control key. Drag it on over. Size that one down to 2.25. Go into node editing mode. We're going to delete this span. We're going to turn this into a Bezier curve. You guys will have this part down pat in no time. We're going to track this part here. Let's pull this out a bit. Pull that in a little bit more. All right, let's go into here and let's delete this right span. Let's delete this left span. Wonderful. Let's go ahead and make sure my size overall, we need to size that down. Let's go 2.25 on that, reduce that a little bit. All right, in our modeling tools, 2-rail sweep, our drive rails. We got our profile. We're going to sweep it between the spans. We're going to click apply. We're going to create that wonderful model. That's what I'm talking about. All right. Let's go ahead and create our finishing toolpath. All right, for this modeling, just for this rough cut to kind of get it cut out now that we're kind of a little bit back on track, I'm going to use a large 1/4 inch ball nose end mill. I'm going to run that end mill about 60 with a plunge of 30. And let's go ahead and calculate that. Oops, I'm going to use the model as the boundary. All right, Lainey, does it matter what side the start point is on? No, it does not matter what side the start point is on. It doesn't at all matter what side the start point is on. And one of the things that I can see from my profile is that it is machining upside down here and backwards. So I'm going to reverse that around. I'm going to mirror that. And that was going to be my problem all along. Even in the 9.10, 5.10, my profile was backwards. What a wonderful treat that was to just now figure that out. So let's go ahead and select these two drive rails. Let's select our profile and apply that. There's my correct model. Let's get rid of this 3D finishing toolpath. So absolutely key number one, and very important on which way your profile is pointing. I just wasted the first 47 minutes of our class, 30 minutes of our class being a dumbass. Okay, so let's close that. And now let's get back into the swing of it all. Now I won't have any issues with my material setup. I've got my material exactly where I want it. No errors, all that wonderful stuff. Because I had my profile facing the wrong way or going backwards, it was recessing into that back side, cutting from the top down, the back down. And this part here, this bulge and all is exceeding, and it was throwing everything off. It was kind of putting me under my Z-plane. It was causing errors and all. Just very simply mirroring it to the proper orientation. And I should have known, because if I were to rotate this part, this is the proper orientation, up and down, right? From the top down. When I had it mirrored the other way, if I were to rotate this part 90 degrees, I would have been upside down. And if I would have known that, I would have, or if I would have observed that long ago, I wouldn't have wasted 30 minutes of our time. So let's go ahead and flip that back around, and let's rotate that part properly. And let's get her done. Okay, very important. Now, let's see here. Mike Smith, running horribly state. Does that mean horribly late or horribly state? Let me know. All right, let's go ahead and selection, use our profile, and sweep it along. All right, wonderful. So imagine if that part was on its side, you want it being facing upright. And that's what my problem was. I had it upside down. It was creating the wrong position, the wrong profile and all. Okay. All right. So if we were to preview this cut. Okay. We've got this Very simple curve for our corbel. Now, of course, we could go more dramatic if we want to. I'm just going very simple because I want to build on top of this. We're going to add some other models and things on top of this to kind of finish this off to get us, looking right and all. Now, what's he doing now? What am I doing now? I am selecting my top row first, my second row last. I'm going to select this and I'm going to create that model again because I'll be damned if I want that. I want that light yellow area here at the top. I want the dark at the bottom. So when I look at this part, it's upright. It goes from the left to the right, guys, and let's talk about that a minute because that's something I'm so backwards here. All right, if this part, once again, if it was rotated 90 degrees, my profile is sweeping from left to right, okay? And so therefore, when I'm in this vertical position, I need to select my top rail first because that would represent the left side of this profile. My bottom rail second, which would represent the right side of my profile. And that way, when it sweeps it in that upright position. Now that we've gotten past all the bugs, got them all worked out and everything, Lord have mercy. Now I want to go ahead and I want to add some things. I want to add some details to my model. I'm going to take some standard clip art that we have. And I'm going to go with our acanthus model. And I'm going to grab this guy here and just drag and drop him on here. And of course, I don't want him wrapping around, so I'm going to size him down appropriately. And let's get him centered. With him selected, I'm going to select my main body model last. I'm going to go into my alignment tools and I'm going to basically get him centered. That way I can come in and select my top component. I'm going to hold my shift key down and I'm going to drag it out. I want to stretch it out right to the edges there. But I also want to kind of pull this down to about here. And so if we look at this in our 3D view, let's go with kind of a split view here. You can see this general shape that's taking place. Now, I'm going to give this acanthus a little bit more body. So let's go into our modeling tab and let's go into the properties of this. And I want to build, let's see if we can, kind of look at this from the side. I want to give it just a little bit more shape height and kind of build it out a little. I want some, I want that detail to be, wrapped out a little bit. Now, with that, if I wanted to recess that into my board some, I could always recess it back, but I don't want that. I want it right on the edge, and I want that wide shape height for this part. Now, if we got fancy, I could draw basically 3 general models of this, top and 2 side views. And if I did this correctly, in a way, I could literally carve some decorative detail into the sides of the blocks as well. I would have to flip my block my square blank or whatever, I would have to flip it. It would not be cut on a board like this. It would be a square blank, 4 inches by 4 inches by, let's say 8 inches long. And I could carve some detail into the side view. On this side here, if I wanted to flip it that way. Or I could create individual parts that would be glued and assembled to these edges to kind of create that wrapped look. That would create 2 seams. So there's a couple of things that we could do here with this part. Now remember, this is just our centerpiece, and it's not going to have, it doesn't have the top and the bottom yet. All right, now what do I want to do with this? I honestly want to widen it out a bit. And let's go a little higher. Okay. Now, don't want to go that high. I don't want to lose my scroll. All right, now notice how my model is actually wrapping. Notice how it's wrapping around this edge. It's trying to go from the bottom of my model up, so it's literally wrapping around this edge like some kind of alien grabbing on. Well, I'm going to end up removing that. And then one of the things that we have in Aspire that we don't have in the V-carves is the ability to remove a model from around a selected vector. And so now I'm going to basically take my 2 drive rails and I'm going to join them back together with 2 straight lines. I'm going to click 1, 2. Okay, and you can see where that border is from my model. And if we turn this to the side here, I'm going to take my model here and I'm going to take my border and I'm going to go into the modeling tab and I'm going to remove or clear everything outside of that selected vector away. When I do that, that's going to remove all of that model to create this piece here. You can see that. Okay. Now, if I didn't want the side of my detail getting cut flat like it is, they're being removed, and I wanted the nice finish, then I would have to undo that, and I would have to bring my part in within my borders to keep those rounded edges. So this is going to be my edge, and I would have to be within that shape to keep that nice rounded edge, and I like that better than cutting it off flat. So we'll go ahead and stick with that there. I don't want the edges of my acanthus cut off. So as long as I'm within my boundary, I don't have to do any trimming or anything. Up here, I'm not worried about because there's going to be a flat shelf and things. And so I need to either, get rid of this, and I think I'll do that. Let's pull this up just a little bit to right about there. And with that model selected, I'm going to grab that boundary, and once again, I'm going to clear outside of that boundary. And I'm going to cut that off because I'm going to have a top surface piece that's going to be coming on here. So now we've got, everybody's like, what in the hell is he talking about? Now I've got my model shape. Now, do I want to create a part that I would attach to each side of this, to kind of, finish off and create some kind of ornate design? If so, why not take advantage of my profile that I have here? And I could go ahead and come in and close this off, join it, should I say, with a straight line. Using the join with a straight line tool. And I could come in and mirror that, creating a mirror copy. I could flip it horizontally. And now I've got a left and right side that I can do some decorative work with as well. And I've got the profiles for those. So let's look and see what kind of complementing clip art we can put into the side of this that would complement our acanthus. So let's look and see what we've got. We've got this flourish here. Okay. Let's go ahead, and if I hit 9 on my keyboard with this selected, I can rotate that 90 degrees. Let's keep rotating around. One more time, right about there. And let's pull this into here. And I'm going to have to take some sacrifices as far as things getting trimmed away. Let's go. Let's back that up some. All right, now with that, go ahead and mirror that part. As a matter of fact, let's get rid of this and let's go ahead and select all of this and just mirror that. Not rotate, you goofball. Mirror, mirror. That's the fourth icon on Transform Objects menu. Let's go ahead and create a mirror copy and flip it to the right. There we go. All right. Let's back that up a little bit. So now I could come in and trim this up as well, just to see what we've got. Let's go with this one first. Select my border and clear everything outside of that selected border. And then once again here on this model, clear everything on the outside of that. Okay. And this could be this will end up being my two side pieces. Now, remember, you got to remember this block is going to be 2.5 inches thick. So when we cut these parts out, when we cut these side pieces out, they're going to be 2.5 inches thick. And we could take these vectors here and these models, and we could create a secondary job that is thinner, you know, 3/4 inch wood or 1/2 inch wood or whatever the case may be. Or we could just, you know, when we cut these parts out, we can end up, you know, trimming them off on the table saw or band saw, you know, whatever the case may be, down to the thinness we need. Because really, we're only going to probably maybe be 1/4 inch thick. And they're going to attach, you know, whatever thickness and everything, they're going to attach to the side parts of our project board here. So we don't want them too thick. You know, whatever just looks appealing there. But we've got our general shapes. And so now one of the key things that we have to do is we've got a set of models here that is at the bottom of our zero plane, while our other model is like up at the top. You know what I mean? And so we really need to kind of build these up to this, so we're not you know, carving all this material away and then coming in and having to mill all this, you know, 2.5 inches away just to mill these shapes. We don't want to do that. We want to kind of build them up. So we're going to go into the Create Shape tool in our modeling tools. And the height, or the shape that we really kind of need to build up to, is our model height. So if I look at the material setup and things, and currently right now, because of my acanthus and everything, I've made my model a little too thick. So let's drop that back down to an overall 2.5. Okay. And so that 2.5 is kind of my magic number. I need this whole overall model here to end up with a 2.5 inch base. So if we were to look at our shape height of this flourish, both flourishes should be the same. So if we look at the properties of this, our shape height is 2.017, or 0.2017, sorry. We need to subtract that from our 2.5 inches when we create our two shapes. So if I come in here and select my two shapes and go into the Create Shape tool, it's going to be a flat profile. And we're going to come in at 2.5 minus 0.2017 and hit our equal sign. And we're going to apply this. Okay. To create those two shapes. Now, mind you, keep in mind, like I said, we're going to be cutting these down to 1/4 of an inch. So it may be just a waste of time and wood to cut them out of this block and then take it over to the bandsaw and trim it off, you know, to where it's like 1/4 inch thick or what have you. We're basically creating a veneer to attach to the sides of this. But you know, that's going to be up to you. Now, if I was making more than one shelf corbel, then all of my individual pieces for my corbel, the actual centerpiece, let's call it, I would be carving them out of the same block, and then my end pieces, I would be making them out of another piece of material that is much thinner. You know what I mean? So, but I can still kind of design them in here and hopefully not cause too much confusion to you guys and girls on how that would be. So now I would have this, you know, decorative edge and everything coming around and, you know, creating this profile. Now, one of the things that I could do is I could give myself a little bit of a decorative border or shape around this instead of being flat, you know, kind of give it a little bit of trim, should I say. And before I do that, because I think it would look better with a little bit of a trim piece around it. Before I do that, let's stop for a minute and ask are you guys caught up with where we're at now, or did I completely lose you from the confusion earlier? I want to make sure that that y'all are we're kind of all on the same page now and we're not confused. If so, now that I know where we are and where we need to be and what the original error was earlier on in the class, I can start over and make it more clear. But let me know if you're with me on that, or if I totally confused the heck out of you on that first part. And if you understand what we're doing with these side parts here. So throw that up in the comment section and let me know. Bum, 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 bum. Now I'm going to move this to the front, these two flourishes. If I right click on them and move them to the front, that will bring them to the front over my models or my vectors, my shapes and all. That way I can see those profiles and everything. Okay, good. So going good. So I'm sorry about that. It was just a matter of the way my profile was turned that was kind of throwing a little bit of confusion in the mix. So I apologize about that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and give myself some space here. I'm going to move these over, these two parts. I'm going to slide this over a little bit. And I'm going to do the same thing with this one. Just give myself a little bit of space. Okay. Now, what I would like to do now, currently right now, this part here is exactly the same height and shape as the side piece of my model, of this lower base here of this centerpiece. And so if I wanted to create a little bit of a border, then I'm going to be aware that what I do, it's going to be kind of coming up on the side here. And I don't think that would actually look too bad if my trim piece kind of came up and isolated that centerpiece, kind of blocked it off from the side view a little bit. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and offset. We'll offset these. We'll select these two parts here. And I'm going to offset them outward with my offset tool. I'm going to offset them outward. I would say 3/16 of an inch. So we're going to go 0.1875. I do want to create sharp corners with my offset. And so I'm going to offset that outward. Go. Now, for my border, one of the thing is up here at the top, I can't, I'm going to have a shelf board here, so I can't have this border that I'm about to create. I can't have it up here at the top part. So what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to end up trimming this piece here basically straight in line here on the front and the back and eliminating this top area. This back area is going to be eliminated, and down here I don't mind the overhang. So let's go ahead and do this. Let's take our polyline tool and I'm going to snap a line from the corner here 90 degrees straight down. Okay. Up here at the top, or I'm sorry, up here at the side, I'm going to snap a line here and come out 90 degrees straight across. Spacebar to finish. And I'm going to use my interactive trim tool. I'm going to trim away this back area here. And I'm going to trim away this area here. Okay. Now, essentially, what I've got is, if I move this over, I've got this kind of open vector. All right. And if I could very much use that just the way it is, or I could go ahead and close it off by making a copy of this one. I do not want to lose this one. This one is my border. I do not want to trim it, cut it, lose any part of it, because it is going to be kind of a profile border for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and I'm going to make a copy of it to a new layer. And I'm just going to call this my side trim border. And with that copy, if I come up to my layer 1 up here and turn off layer 1 for a moment, you can see I've just got this copy here. And I need to do the same thing with this one as well. I want to right click and I want to make a copy of this to that side trim layer. So that way I have my borders, you know, I've got those there that I can use for profile tool pathing to cut the parts out. So in the meantime, I can now use these borders and cut them however, you know, fits me. So if I take my scissor tool here and I just trim this line, it should remove everything but this front little trim there, right? The same thing I need to do over here. We got to create our parts. So take a straight line. I'm going to come out from this corner straight over 90 degrees. Space bar to finish off that line. And down here at the bottom, I'm going to come straight down and space bar to finish that. My interactive trim tool, my scissor tools, I'm going to trim away this upper piece and this little overhang here and down here at the bottom. And then this back piece, I'm going to go ahead and trim that away. So that'll create those two decorative kind of trim borders. And those two borders I'm going to create a shape on. Now I have a choice. What kind of shape do I want to create? Do I want to create a shape that has a kind of a curved profile to it? Do I want to create a flat shape? I think in this case, probably a small little curved profile. So maybe something like a, let's go with a 75-degree curve to that. But right at the very tip top of this curve that's going to happen, I want to flatten it out. I want a nice flat centerpiece. And so I'm going to limit the height about 1/8 of an inch. And if I click apply, if I look at my 3D view, let's see if we can spin around to our parts here. No base height on this. All right. So I want a little bit more height. You see that curvature and everything. I want, you know, I'm only going to get so much height on that as it is on that decorative border there. Now, mind you, these overhang of this model, I haven't recalculated the positioning of my model. So therefore, you know, everything's going to be moved around. But I'd like to get a little more height of that. So instead of 75, I'm going to go up to 90 and click apply. Get a little bit more height out of there. And I'm going to give it just a tiny bit of base height. Tiny bit. I'm going to say probably 1/8 of an inch. Oops, too many decimal points. And click apply again. All right, so now I've really got to think. Is 1/8 of an inch? That's a bit much. Let's knock that in half. Let's go a 1/16. Too many decimal points. And click apply. I'm bringing it back down, you know, a bit. Okay, good. So let's go ahead and let's regenerate our models and things. And as you can see, you know, things have to get moved around, right? We're kind of off position and stuff. So let's get out of our, oops, no, let's not do that. Let's get out of our 3D view for a moment. And let's kind of come in. Bum, bum, bum. right, that looks good. So what I want to do now is I've got to rebuild my shape up for that trim to come into. And don't let this confuse you guys, but what we're doing is I'm going to take these two models, not models, sorry, but these two vectors, and I'm going to copy them to a new layer. And I'm going to just call this my new shape border. Mu shape. Let's try new shape. Let's learn how to spell all together. And I'm going to come in and I'm going to turn off layer 1 right now. I've got my new shape border here. I want everything off so I can kind of work with these alone for a minute. And what I want to do is I'm going to come in with my polyline tool, and I'm going to basically wake up this vector here by hovering over it. And so I can, come down and wake this one up as well. And I'm going to get this intersection. And what I want to do is I'm going to click here, draw a line straight across to this intersection, click, and I'm going to come down and click there and spacebar to finish. Same thing here. I'm going to wake up this vector, come down and wake up this one down at the bottom here so I can get my line tool. And of course it didn't wake up quite a way, so I'm going to do it again. All right, now wake up. Wake up there, Junior. Okay, space bar to finish. And then I'm going to come in and I'm going to trim this inside line away. Okay. And what this represents, if I were to turn on my other shade trim, you see how my inner shape is shorter and not as wide as the new borders I just created. And the purpose of that being that I'm a little off. So one of my lines is crooked somewhere. Let me see which one's crooked. All right, let's turn that layer off. This line is not straight. So I'm going to go into node editing. I'm going to select on and delete this point here. I'm going to select on this bottom node and I'm going to grab this top node here. And I'm going to hit the letter X on my keyboard to move it left and right in alignment. So if I hit letter X, it's going to pull that into alignment. And now if I turn on that other vector shape, I should not be able to see any discrepancies in my line. So I had one crooked line that I had to straighten out. But what it is my current shapes right now are built on these smaller vectors. These guys, the little ones. But my new shape with the border trim is based on this oversized area. So what I need to do is kind of create the shape for it. And so this shape, or these two parts here, these two vectors, should I say, we're going to come in and we're going to go into modeling, create a shape, and that is going to be a flat shape with a height of, again, 2.5, 2.5 inches minus that 0.2017, that shape height of the flourish and everything that's in there. And we're going to go equals. I'm going to apply that shape. close that tool. Let's turn on our 3D view. Go. And now you can see we have this decorative border on the outside. You know, this nice, all it is just a very simple decorative rim, you know, for those side pieces. I mean, there's nothing more than that we went through, and you know, nothing more than that. We created this trim. Now Robert says cove on this profile would look good. Yep, we could create a cove of sorts in this profile and all. But all I wanted to do, imagine if you were looking from the front of the corbel and the sides of the corbel, you know, this would be the you know, the overall design on the front and the sides. Now, we're still kind of in the debate of, do we cut the side pieces since they've got to be you know, like trimmed down from the back end, you know? Do we cut them out of this 2.5-inch piece, or do we just take what we have and copy it over into a new project file and create these 2 parts? Or 4 parts if we're making, you know, a set of shelf corbels, right? We're going to have double of everything that you see here. So would we make these 4 parts out of a, you know, a thinner wood so that our 2 corbels could be made out of the thicker 2.5-inch piece? Or do we carve them out of this and, you know, trim off the back and waste the wood? You know, I'm not a big fan of wasting wood. And so you got to kind of decide on how we would do that. And for me, I would probably end up opening a second instance of the Aspire software. And I would take these, oops, I want that one on. I would turn this off here, my 2 main parts there, and I would take these 2 parts here and these vectors. So with those selected, if I hold down my shift key and I grab the models as well, except for that one, I could copy that, and theoretically I should be able to come in here and create a new file. I'm going to make this I'm going to do this out of 1/2-inch material, and I should theoretically be able to paste those models and my vectors, you know, in that new software. I don't believe my vectors came over very well, so let's select these and copy them. Paste. There we go. And on those two vectors, I'd come into my Create Shape tool. And knowing that my piece is only a 1/2 inch, and knowing that my flourishes are 0.2017, I would probably just go full on. I think 0.5. Nah, let's go 0.375 minus that magic number 0.2017. And if you're not sure where that number came from, let's create this shape real quick, so you can see what we've done here. So basically, these are going to be my new side pieces right here. But if you're not sure where that number came from, that 0.2017, let's go into our other Vectric program here and let's look at our flourish components. If we go into the properties of that, that was the shape height 2016, shape height should I say 2016, and I wrote down 2017. I don't know why I added that 1/1000th of an inch, but still gets me close where I want to be. So now I've got my proper two side pieces that I can create my 3D rough cut, 3D finish cut, and of course I need to duplicate because we got to have 4, right? We've got 2 corbels going on. We got 2 shelves, so let's take all of this and let's Control C for copy and double click on that. Let's move everything over. Let me get into a double view so you can see what's going on. We're going to move everything over. Let's drag a little faster. And if I now hit paste or Control V, either one, it will paste my other 2 parts back in. And now I've got my 4 side pieces. Okay. And those side pieces don't look very bad at all. They're going to look really nice with that corbel. So now I've got my 2 side pieces that I can create my 3D rough cut and my 3D finish cut on. Let's save our work here. Good practices, save our work. I'm just going to call this my 3D corbel side pieces. All right. Let that save. And for our toolpaths, we're going to do a rough cut, do a little bit of a rough cut. I doubt that it's going to take much of a roughing cut. I doubt that it's going to take much of a roughing cut to cut this away. And I might still have to do a little bit of trimming, but that's okay. Not going to do much of a roughing cut because it's not a very deep model, but we're still going to create a roughing toolpath. We're going to use the selected vectors as the boundary, and the selected vectors are going to be these 4 guys right here. Hold your shift key down and select all 4 of our vectors, and let's use our 1/4 inch end mill to mill them. We're going to raster. I'm going to raster along the, I highly recommend cutting along the grain, but that back and forth on these small parts here I think I could probably get away with rastering along the Y and still have a decent look. So let's calculate. Carving along the Y-axis, I should be okay. Yeah, there's not the whole lot there. So if we preview that rough cut, you know, it's going to rough cut that part out. Our finish cut, we're going to use those same selected vectors as the boundary. On this one, I got some detail. I got some small parts. So I'm going to use a ball nose, 1/8 inch, possibly a 1/16. I'll start off with an 1/8 and let's see what that is going to look like. Now on this one, I could offset these cuts, you know, round and around and around we go, or I could raster with the grain. And it just depends on how much, you know, like little detail sanding or anything that I want to do. I'm a big advocate of always carving with the grain, but I'm also a big advocate of, you know, there's not a whole lot of movement happening down here until it gets wider. So I'm actually going to use the offset toolpath for this. And I'm going to I'm going to use the offset toolpath for this, and we're going to calculate that toolpath. We preview that selected toolpath. Okay. Now, I can tell right now that I'm going to be profile cutting this, so it's going to cut this stuff off and everything. But I'm not getting the detail that I want with my 1/8 inch bit. I can tell by all the tool marks in here. So let's go back in and let's change that to our 1/16 inch end mill. And let's calculate that. And if we preview that cut, still getting a lot of tool marks. Not as bad as before, but they're still there. So at this point, I may look at using like a tapered 32nd inch bit or something. Really depends on, you know, how much cleanup I want to get. But for the most part, that looks okay. Now I want to come in and create my profile toolpath. So on those same selected vectors, my profile toolpath, I'm going to cut the 1/2 inch material that I'm carving, 1/4 inch bit on the outside of that cut line. I would add some tabs, but I'm not for the sake of just preview purposes, but we'll come back in and add tabs in a minute. Let's preview that cut to cut out those 4 side parts. Okay. All right. All in all, not too bad. It gives me some room. You can see this lip right here. This lip here gives me a little bit of room when I glue these parts onto the side that I can do some sanding. And I'm not going to be sanding into my molding profile. I will probably most likely be sanding down to that, but I will, you know, not sand into it. So I've got a little bit of lip there. Now, if I didn't want that lip from the get-go, then I could bring my profile cut inward a little bit to get rid of that lip. But for the most part, there's my side parts. Okay, my side pieces. And then back to our main design, we can take now and turn off all of our layers except for our main layer, and we can move these guys here. We can move that, and I'm just going to call this my sides, and I don't want it visible at this time. We'll click OK, because I'm going to take my original model. We'll turn off all the side component models, but I'm going to take my original model, except for these two vectors right here. Get rid of this one and this one. Take this, and we're going to make a copy of that. So if I Control C to copy, I can drag that over wherever it may be. I actually have enough room. I could probably do 3 of them, but and then Control V to paste to get that copy pasted in. And I can go ahead and create my toolpaths for this part. So once again, we'll do our 3D finish cut. I'm going to use the in this case, I'll use my selected vectors as my boundary. I'm going to let my bit go past my boundary a little bit. Not much. Not much. Maybe a 32nd, 0.03125. And I am going to raster along the y-axis. We'll calculate that. Alright, now the one thing I didn't create was my rough cut. I should actually create that first. So let's do our rough cut, because there is some material that's going to get hogged that away. Same material, selected vectors. Gonna let my bit go past that selected vector little, using my 1/4 inch end mill. I calculate that rough cut. All right. So now if we look at that rough cut, just going to hog away that material and rough cut that shape. My finish cut, I believe I created that with a, I don't know why I created it with a 1/4 inch ball. Let's get that done. Let's go into our 16th inch ball nose and calculate selected vectors as the boundary and calculate that toolpath. Okay, we can preview that cut. And then our final cut is going to be our profile toolpath based on our selected vectors here. Profile cut. This one is going to be cutting all the way through the material. 1/4 inch end mill on the outside of the line. Again, we would add some tabs in, but for preview purposes, I'm not. We're going to calculate and preview that toolpath. And if we get rid of our waste material, we'll have our 2 side pieces. Take those over to the workbench along with our end pieces, And, you know, we would end up with a nice looking corbel. Right. Okay, our side parts, our fronts. When you get them glued on, a little bit of sanding that we would have to do, probably a Dremel to get in there, you know, to kind of do a little sanding, a little glue squeeze out and all that stuff to clean up. But all in all, for the most part, it would make some very nice corbels. And what you could, you know, looking at, you know, your model pieces and things, one of the, you know, and looking how you create your models, you know, you could end up with some nice looking corbels overall. You know, here's a general sample of something similar to what we're looking at. I mean, we could create our shapes in a lot of different ways and stuff, but you could, you know, you could come out and do some nice, you know, things with that. So after it's all assembled and all. All right. Any questions up to this point at all? I know there's lots of questions, but don't be afraid to ask. That's what we're here for. That's the only way you're going to learn. We're going to go into our VCarve Pro. We're going to see how we would approach this in VCarve Pro. We don't have the 2-rail sweep tool. We don't have, you know, the modeling tools, create shape tools and things. So how would we go about, you know, kind of simulating that same style of cut? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to borrow the vectors. I'm going to borrow the vectors from all right, it won't let me copy and paste along transform, so I'm going to export my vectors out as a DXF. Let's go into my other one. Export those two out as a DXF. That way I can import them into here so I don't have to redraw them. Okay, that way I don't have to redraw them. Got my general shapes. All right, let's get rid of 2 of these. We don't need them right now. All we need is our profiles and our little trim here. And I need one more vector. No, I don't. I can actually just draw that. That one I remember the size. It was 3 inches by 8 1/4. So 3 by 8.25. Okay. Now, the question of the day is, how would we approach this in the Vectric VCarve Pro if we do not have the modeling tools that Aspire has? How would we kind of create the same similar design? And the answer to that, let me borrow one of these real quick. Bear with me a second. Export as a DXF. All right, let's get out of there and back into our Pro. We're going to import one more DXF file. It's our profile shape. And I'm going to move that over here for right now. Now this is going to be that profile. Remember that profile. So in node editing, I'm going to delete this back span. Remember our profile only has 3 sides, or no back span. But now we need a path for this profile to follow. Well, if you remember in Aspire, we used the 2-rail sweep. Well, in the VCarve Pro, we're going to be using the molding toolpath. So when we have our rails, we only need 1 rail, not 2. We only need 1 rail, not 2. Okay? So we only need 1 rail selected, not 2. And so let's go ahead and let's look at our modeling toolpath, or molding toolpath, should I say. Molding toolpath. All right, and for our molding toolpath, we need a drive rail, and we need a profile to follow. Now, here's the problem. This, you see these lines? They don't extend all the way down. They don't extend all the way down. Well, they're only extending to the distance of the width of this. That's not right, because this profile, when we're using the molding toolpath, has to be laying flat. So if we go to our number 9 tool and we rotate this 90 degrees, we can move it over a little bit. With it laying flat, if I go back into that molding toolpath and I select this rail and I select my part, oops, hold your shift key when you're selecting your part, you can see that extension all the way down, and so I'm going to be, for this part, I'm going to be using a ball nose bit. Okay. And let's see, how do I want to carve that? Bear with me a second. Yeah, that'll be good. All right, let's preview that toolpath. Okay. That's going to create my general shape, here. Now, the question is, Laney, how do we get our acanthurus, onto this, because it's not a model? How do we get that part to follow or sweep along with this profile? Unfortunately, you can't. And there's no real workaround to get it to do so. So in this case, my centerpiece may have to be just a plain, centerpiece. I can't go into my modeling tools. I can't create a component from, I can't, I don't have the tools to, create a model from anything, my toolpath preview and stuff like I do in Aspire. I'm kind of limited to what I've got. If I bring a 3D model in, I don't have the option in here to have that 3D model cut follow the contour. The molding toolpath is exactly what it is. It creates my shape, my basic shape, but I'm not going to be able to get that decorative centerpiece, should I say. And the modeling services, we offer our customers, if you say, hey, Laney, here's my vectors, can you create a shape for me? I can create an STL or a model, a V3M model, or what have you, that you can, bring into your Vectric software that you can import in, and all. But we can at least do the side pieces with our models and stuff. But we're not going to be able to do the centerpiece. With our centerpiece, we can create our general shape, that nice general shape. And if I extend my vectors back, and I use that vector for my profile toolpath, and turn this to its side. Still going to have my general shape, but I can do something decorative with the sides. And so let's go in and create our sides. Now on this, I could do some, decorative fluting of sorts or something, possibly on the front and everything. But on this, I would think, just leaving it as is. Now on my sides, I've got, if you recall, we had that little rounded border on the end. And then we had our 3D model in here and everything. Of our flower, we can go into our clip art. Go down to our decorative here, and we can look and see what we've got. Just kind of organizing this model. We don't have the same models in VCarve Pro as we do in Aspire. You know, Aspire comes with 1,500 different 3D models. VCarve Pro comes with 475, so we're bound to have some differences, but we'll make do what we got. All right, with that, I'm gonna go ahead and take my, let's widen that up a little bit more. Okay. All right, I want to take and let's get rid of this one because I'll be doing some mirror and copying and everything. So let's take our two general shapes here, and we'll end up mirroring it when it's all said and done. But this shape here was just a very simple curved profile, and what I need to do is I need to find my center line of this. Now the overall width of this part, how wide that part is, if I came in with my measuring tool and I did a vertical measurement, it's about 0.19 inches wide. So that's kind of my magic number. And I can come in now and draw a line, snap to the center here and kind of come across. And for this line here, for my center line coming all the way up, I'm going to use my vector to help me draw in that curve and everything. I'm going to take and I'm going to make a copy of this vector. I'm going to make a copy of it to a new layer. And I'm just going to call this my center line vector. And I'm going to turn off all my other layers for the moment. So all that I'm left with is that centerline vector, because I'm going to take and I'm going to go into node editing and I'm going to cut, or delete should I say, this span here. And I'm going to come down here and I'm going to delete this span down here. And I'm going to come in and delete that vector there. So now I have this, center line here. Or it's not the center line yet, but it's going to be. So if I turn my layers back on, this selected vector, I'm going to offset it inward 0.19 divided by 2. Okay, and I do not want sharp corners, I just want a nice curve, and I should be able to offset that, and I went the wrong direction. We want to go outward for that line, and that should give me my center line there. Now with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to trim away my little excess down here, and then up here I don't have any excess, so I need to extend my line. We zoom in, I need to extend that line to there, and so I've got this center line now that I'm going to end up creating a small little arc or curve or whatever the case may be. Now I want a full-on dome here, and my overall diameter is going to be 0.19, right? My width. So for here, I'm going to go 0.19 diameter, and I'm going to left click there and create that little circle. I'm going to take that node editing and I'm going to cut this vector here. I'm going to cut this vector here, and I'm going to get rid of this lower vector. So I've got just that general shape there. Now, if you recall, I not only have a little dome, but I also kind of had a little 1/16 of an inch straight a bit. Remember that little rise that I did? So I'm going to come in here and draw a little rectangle. It's my little way of cheating. And the height's going to be 0.0625. I'm going to move that and snap to there. And I'm going to use my interactive trim tool, and I'm going to trim this away. I'm going to go into node editing, and I'm going to delete this span. Okay, that's going to be my general shape there. So now I should have one continuous vector that I can once again go into my molding toolpath, select my center line. I should be able to do this off a center line. Possibly not. It might need a left or a right. If so, then I'll just use one vector or the other. But off my center line, nope. So it's got to be off the inside vector. So let's off this inside vector it needs to be. So I'm going to get rid of the center line. And I'm going to go make a copy to my center line vector layer. And I'm going to delete this span. I'm going to delete that. I messed up on that one, guys. I did a center line. It should have been the inside line. So now I've got this inside line and my vector here. Okay. And so I should very well be able to turn everything back on. And if I go into my molding toolpath with that vector selected, I should be able to now select this and get that part all the way up. Create sharp corners. I should get a nice calculate little beaded profile there. It's hard to see, and let's see if we can change this wood to a lighter color. That doesn't help at all. Okay, my little beaded profile there. And with that, let's see what size bit that I was using. I'm actually, because that's a very small piece, that's a very small piece. I'm going to, instead of an 1/8 inch end mill, I'm going to use a 16. Oh, instead of a quarter, how about it? Instead of a quarter, let's let's use a 16th inch ball nose for that one. Holy cow. Pay attention to the bits that you're using. I don't know why I'm not paying attention to the bits I'm using. All right, so now I should have 2 swept profiles that will give me my little bead and my profile. Now let's do some modeling. So on my model, let's go with a 3D finish. I'm going to use the selected vector as the boundary for this model. We're going to use a 16th inch ball nose. I'm going to use a selected vector for the boundary. I'm going to let that go beyond the boundary just about the diameter of the bit. And I'm going to calculate, let's see, I don't want to raster. I think I'll do an offset on this one. I'm not a big fan of not carving against the grain, but this is just a small piece. I believe I can do some cleanup with it, so we'll calculate it as an offset cut, kind of that spiral offset cut. And we'll create our preview, should I say, our toolpath. Okay. Now notice it cut all the way down at the bottom. Why did it cut all the way down at the bottom? Because my other model or shape and everything was quite deep. Let's go into our material setup and let's look at our model here. And our model is way at the bottom. It needs to be up at the top, not at the bottom. All right, that little tan area there. Okay, let's calculate that one more time with the model in the proper position. Holy camole, what did we do? All right, let's preview our 2 profiles. All right, so we're able to get that centerpiece kind of sweep cut. We're able to get that cut out. We're able to do our side model in our bead. Now, notice that the side model cut, down in, and that's because that's the proper thing. But it cut my bead away. Cut my bead away when I did that. Now, how in the world can I regain that bead back? Because, I mean, the top of the highest point of my model is flush with my surface of my bed here. But how can I get my bead, back? Because my beading toolpath doesn't give me the option to project onto the toolpath, but it does give me the option to position the model in my material. So what I need to do is I need to find out how thick this model is. And if I go into my material setup, I got a magic number right about here. Okay, Model thickness 0.3382. 0.3382. That's my model thickness. So then I can bring this down in my swept profile for that bead. I can say, okay, the gap above the model, I want to be 0.3382 minus 0.0625. I want to go a 1/16 of an inch. Okay. That should be good. I can recalculate that. And gotta save that wood. Right now my model is carving out to way out here, because I use this vector as the boundary. Well, let's fix that. Let's take this vector, let's make a copy of it. Modeling boundary. I don't know if I'm spelling boundary right, but that's good enough. And in that modeling boundary, let's turn off that toolpath. I need this inside line. So I got one more vector to copy over to that layer. Let's go ahead and go back. Where's that at? That sucker is right, not there, right there. This vector right here, I want to make a copy of it to that layer as well, modeling boundary. And what that will allow me to do is do some trimming. I can trim, oh, not that away. Oh, not that away. Let's see here. Oh, I keep wanting to trim. I keep wanting to trim my line away. Oh, I don't want to go in there. Let's go node editing. Okay. These two nodes here, I'm just going to bounce out a little bit. These two nodes here, I'm going to bounce up a little bit. Okay. That way, I can trim that line away. I can trim this line away. I can get rid of, oh, get rid of that. I can trim this away and trim this away and get rid of this. And now this border here is going to be my selected vector. That's going to be the vector for my boundary. So let's turn on our parts again. And once again, let's go into our 3D finish cut. We're going to use this selected vector as the boundary. We're going to reset our preview. We're going to preview all of our toolpaths again. And this time we should end up with our centerpiece part, our side piece part with our bead in the right position. And our bead should not get cut away. So if we look, we can see our bead over there. Now we need to do our final profile cut. Our final profile cut is going to be, on this entire piece here. And, we've just done some trimming and stuff, so we don't really have that piece anymore. So we've got to make it. We got to make it if we try. So if I come in and copy these to my, once again, new layer, this is going to be my profile border. Layers is a great way to help you separate parts of your design to be able to work with these things. And we're trying to take an approach with a program that doesn't do 3D modeling, as far as creation. We're trying to create that model, and we're utilizing and trying to figure out how would we approach this, and that's what we're doing. So I'm hoping you guys are able to somewhat follow along and not get too overly confused. Okay, if we turn everything back on, I should be able to create now a profile toolpath, cutting all the way through my material with my 1/4 inch end mill. Now again, this is on a 2.5 inch piece. Once again, like before, we would transfer this part over to a thinner piece of material. You know what I mean? We would transfer this part over to a thinner piece of material so that we could, not have such thick side pieces and all. But now the only thing lacking here is that my bit, when cutting the profile, cut that rounded profile, but when it carved this area in here, it milled my profile away. It milled that outside profile away. So you can see half of it's gone. Half of it's gone. And then you can also see in here on the side that my tool, right here on the side, a 1/16 of an inch is a little bit too big. A 32nd would be more appropriate to get rid of all these tool marks. But when carving that bead, my tool carved into my model a little bit here. So both of those I'm not very happy with. I've got to kind of circumvent that somehow. So I'm going to take my model and I'm going to create a boundary around my model, and we do have a tool to do that. We're going to create that vector boundary around that model. Okay. And on that model boundary, my bead runs right into that model right there. And so I need to kind of adjust that so that my model won't carve kind of in this area. So it's not getting cut into. And I'm going to take those nodes and I'm going to bump them in a little bit. I'm going to smooth that one a little. So that this will come up and kind of around. When I carve the model, we're going to use this boundary here. Excuse me. It's not going to look too pretty on that transition right there. Let's see if we can kind of clean that up a little bit. There we go. That'll be good. Now, of course, I don't want these vectors out here. Let's get out of node editing mode. I don't want this vector out here to really play any role in anything we're doing, but I do want this inside curve here to help me when creating my model as my boundary. So once again, we're going to take this selected vector here. We're going to take this border here and this border, all three of these, and we're going to move them or copy them to a, I'm just going to, this is my last layer, trim boundaries. Okay. The reason why I'm making copies is so I don't, mess up my other ones and all. So on here, I'm going to take my scissor tool, and of course I'm going to get rid of that. Get rid of that. Get rid of all of these overhanging parts. They play no bearing in anything. So get rid of those overhanging parts. But now I've got, by doing that, by trimming that away, I've basically created a bunch of open vectors that I've got to close off now somehow, right? It's not the right way. So let's undo that. Go back here to where we were. We're going to use our subtract or our trim tool, should I say. The trim tool will allow us to take our object, hold down our shift key and select a vector, and we can have it clear everything outside of that selected vector away. And what that ends up doing is it closes off that vector, creating its own little border. That's going to be my modeling border for my 3D finish cut. We're going to have the 3D model only cut within the border. Now, because of that, when I use that as the 3D model boundary, well, now I'm going to have all of these flat areas here that are outside of that boundary that aren't going to get milled away, that they would normally get milled away because of my 3D finished toolpath is, was using this as the boundary, so it was milling all of this away. But by doing that, it cut off half of my bead. It cut off half the bead when it milled all of this away. And we can't be having that. So what we're going to do is, let's go back, look at our 3D view for a minute. We've got all this flat area here and down here that we could use a flat area tool to, clearance tool. But let's see if we just can very simply prevent this model from milling my bead away if I kind of keep it limited to this area here. Okay, so that means that I can take this border here and this boundary, and I can kind of blend them together as one. But before I do, let's always make a copy. My scissor tool, let's get rid of okay. So this is going to be my 3D modeling boundary. Looks like I have two open vectors with some overlaps. So let's see if I can eliminate that. All right, I've got some other duplicate vectors. How you can tell you have duplicate vectors is you'll have a pink line with a black line behind it. You know, you can tell you have overlaps that way. And, you know, I've got an overlap here. Now I don't. And I've got two overlaps here and here. So these two are two separate vectors. You know, and they won't close because of the big overlap, these two solid lines here and here. So let's go into node editing. I'm going to delete this span. I'm going to cut this vector here and delete this span. And that got rid of my overlaps, and now I can take and join these. God almighty, this has been a complicated project. Join it with a straight line twice, and there we go. We've got our closed vector. Now I can come into my 3D model with that selected vector, and I can go in that 3D finish cut, and I can use that selected vector as the boundary. Reset my preview. Preview my swept profile and my profile cutout and that 3D finish and my bead. That should save my bead, except for here. And remember, that's because, and we haven't milled this, you know, this flat pocket area yet. None of that's milled, but that bead, you know, is running right into that back side. And, you know, even though I kind of got my border going right where I need it, you know, it's not coming really onto that bead profile. It's still kind of, the bits are kind of running into one another, in a sense. And they're kind of creating this funky little, whatever you want to call it. So bear with me. How do we prevent that? I guess really the only way to prevent it is move the model off of it. I mean, that's really going to be the only way without being such a pain in the ass. You know, that's really going to be the only way without being such a pain. Yeah, that's going to be the only way without being such a pain. Okay, let's go back into that 3D finish and let's use our selected vector as a boundary. I hate to say it, but yeah, it's just not going to work out the proper direction, the proper way. Let's make sure we're not letting it overlap any. Let's get rid of that 0 overlap. And let's calculate or preview. Well, we can't raise the model up a tad because the model's thickness, that reason why it's carving down in like that, is because the top of the model is flush with the surface of the material. And that's how thick the model is. I mean, the highest point of this model is flush with the surface, so it's got to carve down, that deep. Now I should be able to do my profile toolpath. Let me turn it back on. And I should now have my full border, So after all that, it took just moving the model over a little bit. God almighty. All right, so we just live and learn. We got to move the model over a little bit. So now I've got my full bead, around the edge, and I've got my profile shape and that would be attached to this. Now my centerpiece is going to be just a smooth piece. I cannot wrap a model on this. I can't get I can't put a model on this because this, even though it is a 3D model, it's not a component. It's a toolpath preview. There is no component. It's a molding toolpath preview that you're looking at here. Unlike a spire where you can build the component and then you can have shapes wrapped to that component. We can't do that in VCarve Pro, so we're just going to have to sacrifice. So we're going to have a decorative, from the side, it's going to have a nice decorative, carving on it, but we're going to have just a flat, smooth contour around the edges. And that would, it's kind of basically, where we're at. Now, if we wanted to dress up the front, we could try, there's really nothing that we could try, not in VCarve Pro. So it is what it is. Unfortunately, it is what it is. I hate saying it that way, but it is. I was thinking, we could try drawing some vectors and doing some fluting to have the fluting follow that path. But no, it's not going to curve to that because it's not a component. It's a molding toolpath preview. And if we close the preview box, it goes away. Those all we see is our model here. We don't see our swept profiles and our beads. We don't see our, centerpiece and everything. So there's nothing for a shape to wrap to. But, unfortunately. And yeah, we could have moved it away or up, or that way. I thought you meant raise it up versus move it up. We could have moved it up a little, but I ended up just moving it away. And so we go back into our preview. We've got our two shapes, and again, once we've got our shapes and things and kind of a layout and all. These side parts wouldn't necessarily, again, be cut out of the 3/4 or, the 2.5 inch piece. We would take what we've got and what we can work with. We would create our profiles. Let's turn this off. All of our vectors that are, relevant and important and all. And we would copy them, and same as we did as our Aspire, we can open up another VCarve and we can create our side parts, mirroring and copying all of that wonderful stuff. We can create a new file. We can go, 1/2 inch thick. We can paste that stuff on here, and let's center it up. and we can hold our control key down and pull off our copies, however many we, oops, 2 lefts and 2 rights. Don't do 4 lefts, Lord of mercy. Let's delete that one. Let's get these in position. So we'll put get that right about make sure you got enough room for that bit to cut. All right, let's take all of this and move it over. A little bit more. Don't worry about the models. We're not carving all the way out there with the models, so if the models overlap the wood, that's fine. And then go into our mirror tool. Oops, not rotate, mirror. Create a mirror copy and flip about the job center, flip horizontally. Create our right pieces, you know. And then we would come in and create our toolpaths. So for the toolpath, we've got our 3D modeling cut. Let's get our model position correct. Okay. And let's create our 3D finish cut on our borders, our selected. Let's deselect everything. And so that model is going to be selected on that boundary. Oops. That boundary. So 3D finish cut using the selected vector as a boundary. Calculate that toolpath. We'll find out as soon as we calculate the side pieces. We'll find out exactly how long it would take to carve. So we will preview that. That's going to be our model cut. Okie doke. Now we got to create our bead profile. Now, of course, on my little swept profile, let's turn on my little vector there. That vector. These 2 vectors here, this is what creates my bead profile, so I need to copy those. Copy. Just regular copy, not copy to layer. Go back over into my other project, and I'm going to paste. Paste. Okay. And so probably should have created this before I did all the mirroring and copying and everything. Let's that's all right. We'll have our master profile here. Let's move this and we'll just snap that in place. Hold down our control key, grab that and drag a copy over to this one. Drag this copy over to number 3. Let's delete that one. We'll mirror these 2. So we'll select this one, hold down our shift key, select this one, And we should be able to go into the mirror tool, flip about job center, flip horizontally, and it should mirror into place there. Wonderful. And we should now be able to create our molding toolpath. Now in this case, we have to create 4 individual molding toolpaths. So for the first one, we're going to have this part here. Hold down our shift key and select that molding toolpath. Want sharp corners. And we're going to bring this down. Remember, we're bringing it down the thickness of our model, right? So how thick is our model in this part? 0.3382, magic number, 0.3382. And we come into our molding toolpath, and we're going to go the gap above the model is going to be 0.3382 minus a 1/16 of an inch. I believe that's what I did on the other one. Okay. And if I calculate that toolpath, I should be able to preview that selected toolpath, and it should carve down and give me my bead. Nicely done. Number 2, open up a, I can actually just right click and duplicate this 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, a lady. Now on this one, I'm just going to open it up, and I'm going to just select my new vectors and calculate. Everything is all the same, so I'm just going to calculate that. I just duplicated it. With that one done, I'm going to come in, and once again, we'll open this one up. We'll select on this profile and, this. Now, oops, select this first and then this profile. Now notice that it's backwards here. Notice it's backwards. So we can right click on this node and reverse the direction, right, to get it to carve in the right direction. So we'll calculate that toolpath. Now once again, that's not in the correct position. So 0.2757. 0.2757 and calculate. There we go. And last but not least, everything's in place. All I need is the vectors selected. So come in here and grab this vector here, hold down the shift key, grab my shape profile, reverse the direction, and calculate that. Now I can preview all of these toolpaths. Okay. Number 2 did not come out. Number 2 did not come out. So let's look at number 2 here and see what happened. What happened with number 2? I don't know. There's number 2. So let's preview all the toolpaths and let's see what happens. Looks like number 2 toolpath is getting cut out. So a certain vector is not chosen properly. Let's find out here. So open that back up. we should just have this profile, hold down our shift key and have this. We should be able to calculate that. Looks good. Now for our 3D finish cut, this one has the wrong profile selected. That one's got the wrong vector selected. Gotta love when that happens. So okay, this is what happens when you have vectors on top of vectors on top of vectors. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to separate these by some layers. So we're going to move this, and this is going to be our, we're going to copy, or move, not copy, move this to a new layer. This is going to be our final profile. Final profile cut border. And we're going to turn that layer off. That should leave me with this vector and this vector. So if I take, now I can select this vector. That vector, wonderful. Number 3 and number 4. Perfect. Calculate. Calculate my 3D finish cut. And preview all the tool paths. We're almost home stretching. 8 more minutes to 10 o'clock. There's my beads. Perfect. And then let's do our final profile cut. This one I can turn off really all the vectors. Don't really need them all on because all I need is this here, these 4. And we can profile cut this, cutting through our 1/2 inch material on the outside of the cut. We would add some tabs around here, but in this case I'm not going to for preview purposes. We're going to do our final profile cut. And there's our side pieces. A little bit of sanding we would need to do on these little corners down here. Not too shabby. And so someone had asked how long it would take to carve these parts for the side pieces. Well, let's look. An hour and 45 minutes to carve all 4 pieces. An hour and 45 minutes. So the 3D finish on the model, you know, that ornate model is going to be about an hour, and then 8 minutes for each of the swept profiles. Okay, and then the profile cutout. So about an hour and 45 minutes. All right, so now we've got our 4 pieces. You know, we've got our 4 parts cut out for our side pieces out of a smaller, thinner piece of material and everything. And then in our larger material, we could come in and create our let's see what we don't need here. We don't need the trim boundaries turned on. We don't need those turned on. We don't need the profile border turned on or the modeling boundary. We don't need our centerline vector turned on or the trim tool. We need that one because it's got the profile here. We can move this, move that to layer 1. Move this to layer 1. Okay. Once again, we can create our copy over here for our 2 corbels. In node editing, we would, of course, delete this span. Delete this span. Delete this span and this one. All right, we would have 2 swept profiles. 2 swept profile toolpaths using this and this. We want to reverse the direction. There we go. We would calculate that toolpath. We would duplicate that and open up that second duplicate, and we would change it over to this vector and this profile and calculate that. And then turn those off for a minute. We would take these vectors and join them back together with a straight line, or make copies of them and join them. You can either one. But I'm just going to join them together with a straight line. And I'm going to use both of those for a profile toolpath. Cutting through my material 1/4 inch end mill on the outside of the cut. And if we preview our 3 cuts, and of course, you would size your wood appropriately so you're not wasting a bunch of material and stuff. You know what I mean, as far as the width and the height and how wide the board is and stuff. You would size it appropriately. My board was probably a little bit oversized, a lot of waste wood going on there. But there's my 2 side pieces, and to answer the similar question of how long it would take to cut those 2 parts out of the thicker material. You're looking at about 50 minutes to kind of machine and profile cut those. And that's because I've got my profile toolpath taking, shallow cuts. So it's going to be about 22 minutes to profile cut this out. I could reduce that time, tremendously, because the swept profile is only going to be 14 minutes a piece. And all, it's my profile cut that's running around 22 minutes. I could kind of cut that down a little bit. But overall, we'd have about 2 hours and 45 minutes, 2 hours and 35 minutes, something like that, for the whole project in general, not counting the glue up and stuff. All right. I know this was confusing because of the fact of using thicker material and then copying everything over and cutting it out of thinner material and blah, blah, blah. But I'm hoping a small part of you was able to kind of catch on to what the concept of what we were doing. The reason why we just kind of copied the vectors over to another project to cut them out, because it would be such a waste to cut the side pieces out of a 2.5 inch block, right? So, but I wanted to at least draw one of the side pieces in this project, because that's where all my vectors were that I was starting with in my profile and everything. And then from there, I can move it where I need to move it and, make my copies and all that stuff. But if we were in VCarve Pro, this is how we would approach that process. It's a little bit longer roundabout way. We don't exactly get the same 100% results because we don't have the same models and things. But that's what, we can purchase models on eBay. We can purchase models on Design and Make. We can purchase models, all over the place. You can, if you have a certain design you want modeled, you can actually request a model service from, us here at Digital Woodcarver for a low fee. And so we can make models for you that you can bring in and all. But the approach is just a little bit different result, but it's the same kind of outcome, I guess you would say. You know, we got a centerpiece and 2 side pieces and stuff. So hopefully that will kind of give you something to think about. You know, and just in the modeling and the building of models, how we can build them in Aspire. And then, of course, how we would take and say, okay, how do I create a 3D part in VCarve without a modeling tool like Aspire? Well, I have a modeling tool at my disposal. It's the molding toolpath, but that just creates the cut. It doesn't create the component, so I can't use that component to my advantage to make things wrap to it or curve to it or things. So I have to kind of understand my limits, you know. So any questions on this, guys? I know it's been a long night. I mean, we got 3 hours in of just rack your brain. Holy cow. It's not that bad. It's not that bad, you know. But for if you're sitting in this class and you're very new and all, or even if you're experienced and all, it might be my teaching technique, but I may have confused you right from the get-go with the screw up and all. And it's hard to recover from that. All right, any questions, guys, before we call it a night? It's 10:02. We're about to go get some very much needed rest, have a shot of whatever you guys take shots of after you listen to me talk for 3 hours. So, all right. I'll stand by for just a couple of more minutes for questions on anything, and then we'll call it a night. Thank you, William. Glad you enjoyed it, buddy. You're welcome, Travis. Good night, Ronnie. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it doesn't look like there's any questions for the evening. I want to thank you very much for joining me. And until next time, guys, I'll see you soon.